Good to see you this morning, John. Well, look, it was controversial for the government to take the RCN to court over this, but they've been proved right.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I've read the comments from Pat Cullen, the head of the Royal College of Nursing, and it strikes me that she is trying to slightly cover up for what probably from their end seems like a bit of a cock-up, because I mean, the High Court has pretty plainly stated that their strike action does not fall within the legal term of the ballot, basically. So it means that rather than going to the end of Tuesday, they now have to stop on Monday. So it goes from a 48-hour strike to a 24-hour one. I don't think there's any way to see this other than as a kind of victory for the government, whatever your view. I mean, it's even if you support the nurses' strike, you look at this and think, well, you know, they really ought to have got this one right. On the other hand, the broader issue is that the government has still not come to an agreement with the unions in what are, as Pat Cullen says herself, the most trusted and beloved of professions. So I don't think the government should be too cock-a-hoop either. I don't think either side has come out of this looking particularly great at the moment.
The comments from the judge, though, were significant, weren't they? Ordered the RCN to pay the costs of the hearing and told the union in court that there was a high degree of unreasonableness. The outcome was inevitable. And instead of grasping the nettle and conceding, it had forced the case to court. I mean, that's significant, isn't it? The judge is siding with the government on this.
Yeah, as I said, you can't really see it as anything other than the RCN messing this one up. And I think actually, weirdly, the strength of the comments from them reflects kind of how badly they've handled this. It's kind of a distraction technique. You say, oh, this is all the government's fault. How dare they? You know, they talk about kind of dragging nurses through the court when, as you say there, I mean, it was really as much their fault as anybody else's. Again, in the longer term, they will almost certainly reballot. They will probably win that ballot. This is a kind of a hiccup for them. But the broader issue is that this is going to carry on and on and on. I don't know about you, but I'm sure plenty of your viewers are sick of looking at articles from newspapers and websites with a kind of calendar of strike days for every month saying what's not going to be working in the country on a given day this month. It just seems endless. You know, today we have 100,000 civil servants walking out. We have people in the passport office. We've had border control nurses, teachers yesterday. It just seems to be never ending. And the government can argue about it. And I think they're perfectly legitimate. It's perfectly legitimate to argue about the cost of wages to the taxpayer and all these things. But ultimately, voters are going to look at this and think, you're in government, it's up to you to resolve this one way or the other and just get things working again. There's a pervasive sense in the country that things just don't work. You can't see a doctor, you can't, get a passport in a timely fashion. And I think that's a really big problem for the government.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking of problems for the government, as you say, could grind to a halt with the civil servants on strike. But also, we are expecting the Sharp report today, aren't we? The report into the hiring of Richard Sharp on a recommendation from then Prime Minister Boris Johnson to be chair of the BBC.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a good deal of controversy about this. There seems to be a sort of a slew of different reports. I mean, last week we had Adam Tolley's report about Dominic Raab, which obviously led to his resignation. In terms of the Sharp report on the BBC, I think this is something that I don't see this as reflecting particularly badly on this government in the sense that it's headed by Rishi Sunak. No one is going to accuse him of any kind of impropriety. What it perhaps may do, I mean, we'll wait for that report to, offer its conclusions. It might be another kind of nail in the political coffin of Boris Johnson if it does suggest that he acted improperly. Although, to be honest, I don't see a kind of way back for Boris now anyway. So, yeah, we'll await that. But I don't see it as something that is going to have a huge impact on Rishi Sunak necessarily.
There's a story on the front page of the Eye, and I believe it's also been picked up in The Guardian today, about Steve Barclay, the health secretary. Inside the story of an unpleasant health secretary, says the Eye. He's the latest who's been accused of bullying. Sources claiming he's difficult to work with, but not a bully. And this is after Dominic Raab obviously resigned last week after bullying allegations were upheld against him. Do you think this highlights a new chapter, really, significant tensions between ministers and their civil servants?
Well, I mean, I think that tensions between civil servants and ministers are kind of as old as time itself. And as in any kind of working environment, there are always going to be frictions and so on. But yeah, I mean, it does feel as though civil servants perhaps have smelled blood and thought, right, we can actually get our complaints into the press after what happened with Dominic Raab. It's really very difficult to say when it comes to Steve Barclay. We have this kind of briefing and counter briefing, complete unnamed sources in all cases. For what it's worth, I don't buy the idea of some kind of civil service cabal working against the government. I think there probably are civil servants who have their own agendas and who don't particularly like the Conservatives, but I don't think it's like this kind of grand conspiracy. The other issue is that even if you don't think that conduct is necessarily bullying, if it's, let's say, aggressive or impatient or whatever it might be, to me it's a question of effectiveness. Are you getting the most out of your workforce? And are they doing the work for the public and for your government, ultimately, that is going to be as successful as possible? So I think we should always think about it in those terms as well. Whether this goes down the same track as Dominic Raab, we shall wait to see. It certainly sounds quite similar at the moment, but I think there's quite a lot of road to run on this one.